UFC 312 takes place this weekend, and in this video, I'm going to be giving you my exact predictions for how I think every fight in the card is going to play out. So without further ado, let's get into the picks. As always, I like to look at my past week's performance to see what we can improve upon, and I did go 8-3. I did do very well, but it turns out the rest of the picking community did very well as well, and 8-3 wasn't actually as good as you might think. Mike Davis, that was a pick I really was trying to get behind. I was trying to get behind Ziam. I really was. If you watch the video back, there is a point in the video where when I'm picking Mike Davis, it does glitch out, almost trying to signify don't pick Mike Davis. But one would be Mike Davis, like minus 300. But is that trying to tell me something? I don't know. Alas, we picked him. Turns out he's a jiu-jitsu nerd, fights off his back a lot. Not someone that you would like to pick in the future. Saeed Nurmagomedov, Saudi judges just thought Nurmagomedov OV wins. That's kind of the same logic I had for Shara Bullet winning as well. Even if they're in a very close fight about to lose, maybe the judges in Saudi will just give them the nod. Turns out, not the case. First time in Saudi history that hasn't been the case. Both of the Nurmagomedov and the Magomedov lose decisions in fights that were very close. So, not saying that I got robbed of a 10-1 card, but, next time, let's not just be like, oh, bet the OVs in Saudi. There has to be more basis behind that. So, without further ado, let's get into the picks for UFC 312. We are going for the sweep, chock full of underdogs. Let's get it. The first fight on the card for UFC 312 is Hyun Park taking on Nyamjargal Tumendemberel. So, at first, I did want to take a dog shot on Nyamjargal, considering he actually has a UFC performance that wasn't horrific. He fought Carlos Hernandez in a very close fight, but in that fight, we learned that if you just consistently shoot takedowns on Nyamjargal, there is a chance that he will gas out. Most of his wins, really, there are decisions, but the ones where he's getting high-flying knockouts and submissions is very early in the fight. I did notice in his road to the UFC fight against Topnoy Kiram, there's multiple points in the fight where he's just like on his back and he's like smiling. Like he's happy to be there. He's not really urgent to get back to his feet. And honestly, that's not someone that I want to trust with my money. Someone that's just going to sit there and guard and smile, give little hand taps. Not my type of underdog. Now, Hyun Park, he's only showed himself in one UFC fight against Shannon Ross, the chinniest guy at flyweight, and he was able to get a KO victory on him. But if you go back, Hyun Park for the flyweight division just looks like he has different kind of strength, a different kind of power. When he lands on people, it's drawing a different reaction than when like a Nyamjargal lands on someone. So Nyamjargal does have the 5-inch reach advantage, which was a big number when I first saw this, but over the course of reviewing it, I think that Hyun Park is the correct pick to make at a decision. I think he has the takedowns that he can go to. That's a path to victory for him since Nyamjargal doesn't really do well with those. And I feel like every time there's a striking exchange, Hyun Park is going to land something bigger than Nyamjargal. So for those reasons, give me Hyun Park in the first fight of the night by decision. Next fight on the card, we have Quillan Salkid taking on Anshul Jubli. Now, right off the bat, you might be like, Fins, why in the fuck are you picking Anshul Jubli? He's plus 450. Okay, that's number one red flag. Number two, he got knocked out by Mike Breeden of all people in his last fight. Number three, he basically quit in that fight because he was getting barked at. So there's a lot of red flags for picking Anshul Jubli. But honestly, let's look at Quillan Salkid. If you look at his Dana White Contender Series fight and fights before that, he's not, I don't want to say a one-trick pony, but he's very narrow-minded when it comes to he wants to shoot takedowns and he wants to shoot as many as possible. He shot 22 takedowns in his Contender Series fight. He only landed 9 of them, and that was able to edge him the decision victory against Gage Young, who was a pretty good striker at the time. Now, Anshul Jubli, it's been how long? It's been, I think, a year and 3 months since his last fight, okay? Number one. Number two, he's like the fighting pride of India, okay? I know in general we like to fade Indian fighters, just in general. But in this specific matchup, I think Jubli, he's had a year plus to think about his loss to Mike Breeden. He's been in the gym. He saw Pooja Tumar, his Indian cohort, also get a UFC victory a couple months ago. So it's also in Quillan Selkeed's hometown. It's also Selkeed's debut. There's a lot of pressure on Selkeed, and his main method of victory is shooting takedowns. So I think Jubli, he could lose round 1 because he gets controlled. But I think as the fight goes on, Selkeed is going to get gassed out from the takedowns. I think Jubli is going to find a way to reverse them and get into a top position of his own and land his own ground and pound. I don't think he's the best fighter in general per se, but in this specific matchup, I think he has a much better chance than plus 450 to win this. I think he just has to evade the takedowns long enough to gas out Selkeed and potentially find either a late finish or cruise to a decision victory. So for all those reasons, I think there's enough meat on the bone to take a stab at Anshul Jubli by decision. Next fight on the card, that is right, we're going with back-to-back underdog picks. We're taking Kevin Jousset versus Jonathan Micallef. We're taking Jonathan Micallef. Now, Kevin Jousset, I was high on him. Okay, that's fair. I did have him beating Brian Battle in his last fight, which he got, basically dusted on the feet and mercy stopped by the ref. So there's that. Kevin Jousset does have a good judo background, so most people that have attempted to take him down thus far, he's gotten reversals of his own on them. And Micallef's main path to victory in this matchup is going to be to shoot takedowns and try to find a submission. His striking isn't the best. I did look back at that one loss that you see right there. It was a 4th round stoppage, and in the prior 3 rounds, he was landing some good strikes. He did knock down his opponent, I think, twice before he got finished. And then if you look at his Contender Series fight and the fight before that one, I think he took the beating in this 4-round fight, and then he's like, you know what, I can just shoot takedowns, and I'm very good at that. I'm pretty elite at that, and just find a submission. So I think in this one, it's going to be very similar, okay? Kevin Jousset, he did just get dusted on the feet not too long ago, 4 months ago. So I think if this fight were to hit the ground, Micallef has good submissions off his back. We've seen good sweeps from him, good reversals. I think Jousset himself is going to also low-key want this to be on the ground because he just got chinned 4 months ago. So for all those reasons, I think there's enough meat on the bone yet again to trust Micallef to get takedowns, to trust Micallef in his home country as well, to find a submission victory against Kevin Jousset. I think this is possible. He has a higher reach as well. He's low-key a bigger fighter in general. So give me Jonathan Micallef to find a submission in round 2. Next fight in the card, we have Kody Steele taking on Rong Zhu. I'm going to keep this short and sweet. Rong Zhu has only fought 1 fight in the UFC other than the road to the UFC. And usually that one fight after the road to the UFC it's a tell. It kind of shows you where that fighter's at in terms of their career. So he was 25-5, fights in the UFC, gets doctor stoppage by Chris Padilla because Chris Padilla lands a crazy elbow and causes a giant eye swell. Now, in this one, Kody Steele, I just think he's a very good prospect, honestly. He has great wrestling, and he has knockout power on the feet. Not sure what else you need to be a good prospect. And in this one, he's going against someone that just got doctor stoppage not too long ago. I would say 4 months ago. And, his trajectory is up. Rong Zhu's is down. I potentially might put Kody Steele in a parlay. I'm pretty confident. He's one of the most confident picks I have on this entire card. So with that being said, I think Kody Steele, he could get a decision, but I think he's going to find a finish in round 2. Next fight in the card, we have Aleksandre Topuria taking on Colby Thickness. Colby Thickness, the main reason people are picking him is because Volk is going to be in his corner. So that's a huge thing. And he's also training partners with Volk. However, if you look at Aleksandre Topuria's film, he has Ilya tendencies. Like, his striking is very Ilya-like. And I do like the fact that he chases takedowns, and once it's on the ground, he's not chasing subs. He's more chasing positions, and then when he gets in a good spot, he starts landing epic ground and pound. I believe that's how he won the last 2 fights of his, by epic ground and pound. Granted, he hasn't fought in a year and 8 months, but he's also 29 years old. He's been training with Ilya himself, like his brother, and ultimately, Thickness has some good finishes, a KO, a rear naked choke. It's a tough one. If we're going based off odds alone, I think Thickness might be worth a dog shot. He's never been finished, but I ultimately just see this playing out like Topuria gets the takedown, Topuria gets this into a crucifixion, Topuria lands ground and pound, Topuria finds a round 2 KO. That's what I see happening, and that's what I picked. Next fight in the card, we have Kang Wang taking on Bruna Brasil. And right off the bat, another huge underdog selected by me. Plus 340 we're getting for Bruna Brasil. Not much for me to say here, okay? If you look over the course of her career, not the best. She's actually been getting finished. She got KO'd by Denise Gomez. Not a good look. But her last fight is what everybody's pointing to, because prior to her last fight, she joined the Fighting Nerds. Great gym, great fighters there. And then she showed up against Molly McCann as a plus 300 and just beat her soundly. On the feet, it was all Bruna. On the ground, it was all Bruna. And I think in this one, we might see a similar outcome. Now, Kang Wang did get fraud checked in her last fight, but prior to getting finished, she was winning the striking exchanges. And, you know, potentially because it was in Macau, maybe she was really trying to get a finish, so she was chasing harder. All that stuff, that is at play. But in this specific matchup, with the height and the reach being very similar, I just think Bruna Brasil is just more well-rounded than Kang Wang. Kang Wang, we know, is going to only try to strike here. We haven't really seen Kang Wang on the ground yet. We've seen it maybe on the regional scene, but no one's actively tried to get Kang Wang to the mat. I think Bruna Brasil might be the first woman to try to do that, and I think she's going to have success doing it. I think she's going to find the takedowns. I think Kang Wang is going to be like a fish on the ground. I think Bruna Brasil could potentially find a submission, but ultimately, I'm going to take the safer route. Safer, she's plus 350, and I'm talking about safe. But the safer route is Bruna Brasil chases takedowns and finds a decision victory, which is what I have picked and what I think will happen. In the card, we have Tom Nolan taking on Vyacheslav Borshev. This is the battle of two of the chinniest lightweights on the roster that have two of the heaviest hands on the roster as well. So it's very intriguing. Neither guy is going to shoot for a takedown. I looked back, and neither guy, I don't believe, has shot for a single takedown in any of their UFC fights. So in this one, expect both of them to shoot 5+. That's the logical answer, right? But ultimately, Tom Nolan, he gets chinned basically on nearly every striking exchange. But Vyacheslav getting knocked down by Chase Hooper, that is a concern. But Vyacheslav taking on James Yontop, there's a very similar matchup to Tom Nolan. I do think Tom Nolan is more physically imposing. I just don't see how you can possibly pick him in this spot. He's going against a guy with heavy hands, and he has one of the weakest chins in the division. Can't really see Tom Nolan winning this one unless he actually utilizes takedowns, because Vyacheslav is a fish when it comes to takedowns. So a sneaky bet might be Tom Nolan takedowns. You know, we'll see what that prop is lined at. Probably plus 1,000 because he's never shot for one. That could be interesting. But ultimately, since everyone's predicting round 1 KO, this is going to be a tailor-made decision. James Yontop, he went to decision. Tom Nolan's went to decision with Alex Reyes. Everybody thought he was going to get a round 1 KO. Can easily see the same thing happening here. For those reasons, Vyacheslav Borshev by decision. Next fight in the card, we have Jack Jenkins taking on Gabriel Santos, and this feels like one of the fishiest picks on the card, but, you know, I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. They got me by the hook. Jack Jenkins, I can't help myself. You know, 72% of people on Tabology have picked Jack Jenkins, even though he's plus 200. The betting line hasn't moved, even though 70% of people have picked him. There's something we're all fundamentally missing. But I'll tell you why I picked him. I think he has great leg kicks, okay? I think he has good durability. The KO loss is actually hogwash because he just snapped his arm when Chepe was trying to go for a takedown. So not putting too much credence into that. I think he has great striking. I think he has good cardio. And ultimately, I think both guys are mirror matchups for each other. It just comes down to who's going to shoot the takedowns first. Both guys have takedowns in their arsenal. And in his home country, Jack Jenkins, I think he knows the path to victory is to get takedowns, is to shoot for them, is to fight at range when he can. And Gabriel Santos' only UFC win has been against Yiza, and Yiza, not the best UFC fighter overall, even though that fight was very closely lined. You know, I'm not really putting too much into that. He did get finished by Onama, and he did go to split decision with Lerone Murphy, who is currently basically top 5 in the weight class. So that is something to think about, but I just think it's going to be whoever gets the takedowns first. And honestly, I see Jack Jenkins utilizing the game plan better than Gabriel Santos. He's more of a veteran in the game. So for those reasons, Jack Jenkins by decision. Next fight in the card, we have Jake Matthews taking on Francisco Prado. At first, I thought this was going to be a slam dunk give me a Jake Matthews pick. But the more you dive into Jake Matthews, the more it becomes harder to just pick him at all. Because his last win was against Phil Rowe, a fight that was 1-1 heading into round 3, a fight that Matthews only won, I feel like, because Rowe's lack of IQ. That's what I feel like. Matthew Semelsberger knocked him down 3 times in their fight. Keep in mind, Matthew Semelsberger is no longer on the UFC roster. And then before that, Andre Fialho, who was one of the chiniest guys in the welterweight division, he gives him a clean knockout. Now, Francisco Prado, he has 2 losses, okay? Both of them by decision. And for Francisco Prado to win, he has no decision equity. But I also think that if he just evades the takedowns, I think in a simple striking exchange, Prado is going to land something clean on Jake Matthews. Prado was landing clean on Zell Huber, you know? And then he got decisioned because Zell Huber just has too much of a reach. But in this matchup, Jake Matthews has been wobbled and chinned and knocked down recent fights. Jake Matthews doesn't have the greatest wins in the welterweight division. Francisco Prado, in his 2 losses, he showed that he's an absolute dog. You know, he didn't give up against Zell Huber. And against Malarkey, he was just taken down. And that was 2 years ago when he was 20 years old. So I think now that he's like basically 23 years old, he's been in the fight game in the UFC for 2-3 years now. And it's on the main card, so I think the UFC thinks that there's going to be a finish in this fight. For all those reasons, I'll take the dog shot, even though Francisco Prado, he does only really have one path to victory, which is a finish. Jake Matthews can wrestle this out to the decision. But I just don't think Jake Matthews has the ability to do that in this matchup. I think Prado's going to give him enough fits in the grappling department that's going to lead to a knockout victory from Francisco Prado. Next fight in the card, we have Jimmy Crute taking on Rodolfo Bellato. And at first, I was going to just pick Bellato based on Jimmy Crute retiring in his last fight against Alonzo Menafield. But, you know, the more I look at it, the Alonzo Menafield fight was a year and 6 months ago. Okay, Jimmy Crute still is only 28, about to be 29 years old. He's still super young in the game. If you go on his Twitter and Instagram, I know that's not the best handicapping, but if you go on his Twitter and Instagram, he does show that he's been training hard. He's all in on this fight. And then if you look at Rodolfo Bellato, there's not really a lot you need to fade him. Ihor Potieria basically knocked him out in round 1. The ref didn't stop it. Then he got his own finish. Murtaza Talla was rocking him pretty good in this Dana White Contender Series fight. Vitor Petrino got a clean knockout with a left hook in their Dana White Contender Series fight, and we know now Petrino isn't, you know, the most powerful striker. He hasn't really knocked out anyone since Bellato. So for all those reasons, for a bet, I don't know if I can get around to betting Jimmy Crute. He literally retired last fight. He literally was in the octagon, took the gloves off, retired. So anyone who has that mindset, kind of tough to trust with your money. But for a pick, I think it's worth of a pick. So I think it's going to be an early finish, of course. And I think Jimmy Crute is going to dug his way to a victory. Give me Jimmy Crute by round 1 KO. Next fight in the card, we have Tallison Teixeira taking on Justin Tafa. And it's an Australian card, so of course they're going to put at least one Tafa brother on the main card. And this time they gave him a tall, lanky guy in Tallison Teixeira. Tallison has a 9-inch reach advantage. He has a 7-inch height advantage. And usually when Tafa gets put against these types of guys, he finds the KO victory. Because, you know, when they're that tall and that rangy, the overhands are much easier to throw and land. So for those reasons, you might just, you know, blindly take Tafa plus money plus KO. But the more you dive into the tape for Teixeira, he's not just an average tall heavyweight. He actually has good footwork. He has good striking. He gets out of the pocket, gets out of danger pretty quickly, and he lands pretty good counters of his own. So right now, I think the price we're getting on Teixeira is pretty savage. The only reason that I'm hesitant is because this number one, this is his first fight off of the Dana White Contender Series, so it's always bad to trust a DWCS rookie. Number two, it's on the main card. It's literally the third fight from the main event, so that's a lot of pressure on Teixeira to find a finish as well. And Tafa has been in the spot multiple times, so there is a lot of reasons to take Tafa. But fundamentally, if we're talking about fighter versus fighter skill, I think Teixeira has the tools to win this one. I think he's just going to keep the range, and I think he's going to frustrate Tafa to the point where he finds that cross, finds that KO, and I see it happening in round two. And that brings us to the co-main event of the evening, Weili Zhang taking on Tatiana Suarez. And in this one, I'm just going to keep it very simple, okay? I have no idea, number one, why the odds are even. I think Weili should be like minus 200, but that's besides the point. Number two, Tatiana Suarez, her striking is little to non-existent. So in this fight, if you're taking Tatiana, you're basically expecting her to shoot multiple takedowns on Weili and actually potentially even find a submission finish against Weili. Well, Weili has shown that against regular strawweights in the division, she's just a beast. She overpowers them. She's just way too good. She's not in close fights with any of these girls. She smoked Zhao Nanyan, okay, even though she should have got a round 1 sub, she smoked her. Amanda Lemos, she smoked. Carla Esparza, she smoked. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, she smoked. She's smoking everyone in the strawweight division. It's not even close. And now we're expecting Tatiana Suarez, who she's fought Jessica Andrade, got a sub. Congratulations. So did Erin Blanchfield. Montana De La Rosa, that is who she fought 2 fights ago. 12-7-1. Okay. Nina Nunes. Okay. Carla Esparza, 6 years ago. This is 4 fights, 6 years ago. This lady is 34 years old. And she's fighting for the championship for the first time in her career? 34 years old? History of injuries? Yeah, maybe you could say that, she's not injured anymore. So, that could potentially mean that she's going to do good. But honestly, I just don't see it. This is a huge step up in competition from Jessica Andrade, number one. That was a year and 5 months ago. She's been on the shelf. Weili has fought 3 times in 2 years. She's fought twice in 6 years. Not really seeing how Tatiana wins this one. Yeah, she can shoot takedowns, but I think that if that's her entire game plan, she's going to gas herself out. And I think Weili can actually find a late round finish. So, for all those reasons, experience, just overall MMA skill, injuries, history of career, trajectory, I think Weili Zhang wins this pretty handily, and I'm going to take her by decision. That brings us to the main event of the evening. We have Dricus du Plessis taking on Sean Strickland, and I feel like I'm on an island taking Sean Strickland here, but I'll go ahead and explain myself. So, in their first fight, I think that Sean Strickland potentially won, okay? And whenever the fight took place in a grappling department or wrestling, of course Dricus was the one shooting. But number two, Sean Strickland evaded all those situations pretty nicely. He got off the ground in like less than 10 seconds after Dricus shot, and there was not a single moment in the fight where he had any threat of being subbed. So if we're going to pick Dricus because he has more paths to victory, let's remove the sub part, because he's not subbing Strickland because he didn't get close to it in their first one. So that's number one. Dricus, in my opinion, has no sub equity. Number two, decision equity. Strickland is the king of decisions. I know Dricus won the first decision, but Strickland is the decision king. Almost all of his wins in the UFC have been by decision. He's just good at points fighting. He's good at moving forward. He's good at giving the judges what they want to see to give him the victory. So that's another one. Dricus is mainly finish or bust, even though he did win the decision against Strickland. He's mainly finish or bust, okay? Now, another reason I like Strickland, it's the money line, plus 175. In the first fight, it was even money both ways. Now we're getting Strickland plus 175, and he lost by a split decision. He barely lost. A lot of people are saying, "Oh, Strickland definitely lost," because look at how he looked after the fight. But he looked all beat up because they had a headbutt. They had a headbutt, and that caused a cut. That's why Strickland looked like that. And now I also see the arguments where DDP, he was slow in round 1, round 2, because he was trying to prepare himself for rounds 3, 4, and 5. Now he's experienced that, so he knows exactly how to pace himself. I'm not really buying that argument. I think if DDP is like, "Oh, let me go out there, balls to the wall, round 1," I think he will gas in this fight. I think that mentality actually will hurt DDP. I think if he goes in here and he's like, "Oh, I had way more energy in round 5 last time, let me go all in round 1," I think that actually will hurt him. So, for all those reasons, considering how razor close the first fight was, considering that Sean Strickland is a decision merchant and he knows exactly how to win a decision, considering Dricus, in my opinion, has no sub-equity in this fight at all, and I think it's going to be a stand and bang affair for 5 rounds, I think Strickland has all the chances in the world to come home with this victory. There's no home field advantage. It's in Australia. Neither person's Australian, so the judges have no dog in the fight. So for those reasons, I think there's enough meat in the bone yet again to pick Sean Strickland in the main event to win by decision. Thank you for getting to the end of another episode of Finn's Chats. I hope you enjoyed this one. Let me know in the comments who your favorite underdog this week is. We picked a lot this week. I'm kind of feeling confident because we went 8-3 last week, so I'm like just sniping these underdogs like they're nothing. Let's see if we can come up with a sweep. Let's see if we can become profitable. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day, you savage.